name is Grieves. I live in Seattle, Washington, and I'm fucking pumped. Like, I grew up, my grandfather was like a super musical person. He was a concert pianist out of Germany, and then when the Holocaust hit, they fled Germany and came to the United States. And so, I mean, he didn't actually get to pursue his career. It's like a concert pianist. He ended up like having to start a grocery store when he got here. But I grew up listening to him play, and my dad, of course, grew up listening to him play, but my dad kind of took his own spin on the music that he liked, and like, he was kind of, you know, he was like a mamas and the papas kind of guy. As a kid, like, I was super into melody. So all the music that I was listening to when I was younger, like, it wasn't necessarily, like, for me, it wasn't like crisscross for me. I was more like, it had to have like a super strong melody to it, and that's what caught me. And I think that's like when I was a kid, like high school, or even like junior high, I kind of got into the pop punky stuff a little bit, like No Effects and stuff, because their harmonies and their melodies reminded me of kind of what was playing around my house when I was a kid. And then I definitely, I think I carried that into the music that I make with hip hop, because hip hop was always, for me, it was a way for me to be able to do everything at once. And it was the easiest way for me to experiment with the music that I was feeling inside of myself. So it's funny, I've been doing these videos and I'm like, Ice Cube, I want to hang out with you. But it's true, Ice Cube was my shit. Like, I remember when I first discovered him, like, I was pretty late into the hip hop scene, and it was like, for me, it was 8th grade with Ice Cube, and then, you know, it was, you know, everyone would, like, all the punk kids were playing like the NWA record, and I was like, whoa, this is edgy as fuck. And then I got West Side Connection's Bow Down, and it was hilarious to me. Like, just, like, the irony in that record blew my mind. And then I started listening to it more and more and more, and then Wu-Tang got their claws into me, and it was a fucking rap after that. So, you know, it gave you something to do. Like, concerts were always something to do, because I was living in a small town. I was living in Fort Collins, Colorado, and a concert was always something that you could go and do on the weekend, and you see everybody that you know in the same place. So music was like such a social thing for me that I didn't actually start pursuing it seriously until I kind of lost a lot of social activity, I would say, in my life, because I got in like a bunch of trouble when I was a kid, and I got like carted off, and that's when I really started writing, and especially when I got cleaned up, like, I started writing like a lot more, and I started finding out that it was super easy for me. And I mean, it took a long time for me to actually start like being comfortable with singing, and I'm still not even that comfortable with it, but like, I always knew what I wanted, so, you know, I started at the bottom, and I just kept chipping away at it and working and working and working and working, and I never really thought of it as like a career until other people started hearing it, because it was like a hobby of mine, you know, like, and it kept me sane. Like, when I moved to Washington, I had no friends. I just picked up and moved. It was like a compulsive, crazy thing that I did after high school. And I moved to Olympia, Washington, and I had one friend, and his name was Austin Powers. That was his freaking name. And so I lived in this apartment with him, but he was some crazy hippie dude that went to Evergreen College, so he was always gone doing his own thing, and then he ended up going to like Cairo for like 4 months. So I was all alone in this apartment, and I like just wrote to stay sane, and then I made a bunch of music, and I started meeting people that could record me, because at that point in time I'd never recorded anything, and I didn't know. And I remember I went to this recording studio in Seattle, and I was like laying like 3 dubs of the whole entire verse, like everything, so it just sounded like A to me, like screaming this, and it, you know, it took a long time to find my voice and a bunch of shit like that, but I had always felt like a positive momentum as soon as I started recording. Touring's been the backbone pretty much of everything that I have to show for myself right now. Like, I started booking tours when I was, man, like back when MySpace was like popping the fuck off. Like, MySpace was like the shit. You get friend requests from like sexy ass chicks, and you're like, oh my God, people really like me, and that quickly faded. But, you know, it was a way for me. I started networking with other people, and I started booking these rinky-dink fucking tours from Seattle, like down to the West Coast, down to the Southwest, and we had a monthly in Seattle, and we called it Indie Hop. So whenever we would get a show from somebody else, we'd trade with them and be like, if you come up to Seattle, you know, we got you on our night. I remember it was the last like MySpace tour that I really booked. I was at I was at the Greek Cuisina in Portland, and there was nobody there, and it was like my last day, and I was like, fuck this, I'm getting shit-faced, and I was throwing chairs across the room. Like, I was like, I'm not even playing, fuck this, and I was just winging chairs across this room in this Greek restaurant. And then, you know, we left, and I was like, huh. And then I was at the Chop Suey like a week after, and Henri from Grayskull comes up to me, and he's like, hey, you're Grieves. And I was like, you're Henri from Grayskull. And they're like, you know, they're top notch in Seattle. And he's like, you're fucking crazy. You were throwing chairs the other week. And I was like, what? No, what are you talking about? He was like, yeah, you were at the Greek Cuisine throwing chairs. Awesome show. And I was like, what? I was like, you were there? I was like, I thought it was just the bartenders watching. He's like, it was a DJ Wicked's night. I was just chilling, kind of watching you guys. And I was like, huh. So that's when I met him, and then he brought me out with you guys. It was Rhymesayers in 2007. I was DJing and shit. I was DJing, working the merch table, hyping for Mac Lethal, and doing the driving. Like, I was, at that point in time, I was like, fuck it. Like, this is, even though I'm not even really rapping on this is the most substantial shit that I've done to this point. So I put myself out there, like, really hard, and I made 10,000 demos. Through copycats here in Minneapolis, and through that atmosphere tour, I handed out every single last one of those demos, and I was like chasing people down, being like, put this in your purse, like, you have to have this. And by the time we got back, like, our iTunes sales on the record that we were handing the demos out for had skyrocketed and had pretty much paid for the demos. And then that's when, I'd say for me, where I was like, all right, I can seriously do this. But once I was kind of standing there at the crossroads, I was like, I gotta go my direction. And so, you know, I parted ways with them, and I was actually having like kind of a difficult time with it. And I remember POS called me up, and he's like, you need to talk to somebody about this. Like, you need to talk to somebody about it who knows what they're talking about. And I was like, well, I mean, I know you. I was like, do you want to talk? He's like, no, I'm gonna call you back. And I was like, pfft, like, way to set it up and leave me hanging, dude. And he texts me Sadiq's number, and he's like, Sadiq is waiting by his phone, call him. And I was like, whew. The whole room got cold, and I was like, I'm gonna call Sadiq, I'm just gonna call him up, and he's gonna be cool with that. And I called him up, and we talked for like 3 hours on the phone, and he was kind of telling me, you know, like, even if you feel like you're out of options, like, you just made a decision, you know, like, even if to do nothing, that's still an option. And, you know, I was like kind of stressing, because I've always wanted to have my records in stores and stuff like that, and I had passed on an opportunity, and you know, he really explained a lot of things to me. And then kind of by the end of the conversation, you know, he was just kind of checking where felt like he was checking where I was in my head and stuff, and then he goes, well, what are you gonna do with the record that you have? Like, you know, you have this record, what are you gonna do with it? Because you're not, he's like, you're not going to put it out, so what are you going to do with it? And I was like, well, that's what I need to figure out. And he's like, well, why don't you let me do it? And I was like, yeah, sounds good. I could do that. You know, we could talk about it. It was definitely an awesome. I wasn't expecting it. I just was kind of expecting him to kind of mentor me through the situation.